Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another episode of Meet La Prensa. Viewer, if you like what you see here, if you're finding value, be sure to hit like and subscribe below. Our guest today actually is a momentous occasion for us. It is our very first political candidate for elected office. Reverend Wendy Hamilton is running for Congress right here in DC. It's super exciting to have you on our show, Wendy. Thank you so much for coming on, Reverend Wendy. And first, I guess the first question we've got to ask is, why run for Congress? I feel like, in some sense, you ask all over the country, what's the least popular institution in the United States? And chances are a lot of people are going to say Congress. So what is it that, why is it that you want to, why do you want to put yourself through that, if you will?
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Pablo, for this opportunity. And I didn't know I was going to be the first political candidate, so I feel kind of honored. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I really appreciate it. And I ask myself every day that same question, like, what are you doing? I opted to run for Congress ultimately because I believe that Congress is where someone such as myself, who likes to advocate for those who can't advocate for themselves, to speak on behalf of the voiceless, to call out injustice, to speak to needs of the masses. I felt like that was the best match for my particular personality and skill set. And I certainly wanted to do that on behalf of the residents of Washington, D.C., my adult home and the place that I love so deeply. So for me, Congress made the most sense. Some people said, well, why not do city council or mayor? And I said, well, those are more executive functions, and that's not necessarily my strength. And I think it's important to know your strengths and know where you can feel most useful. And Congress was that for me.
So the sitting congressperson for the longtime sitting congressperson for Washington, D.C. is Eleanor Holmes Norton. What would you do different than what she's done so far as a congressperson?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to say is that I have a tremendous amount of respect for Delegate Norton. She has been in service to this city for 30 years. And so I like to say to everyone, I'm not running against Eleanor Holmes Norton. I'm running for D.C. And so I say it from that perspective, that all I would seek to do would be to build upon the legacy that she has established, particularly when it comes to statehood. Much of her work has been around bringing us the statehood that we deserve. We're still being tasked without representation. That's a whole other show. But
Sure.
She's dedicated her entire career to getting us to this point. And here we are, where it passed the House historically twice. It's been heard on the Senate floor for the first time, actually second time in history, it actually made it to the Senate floor. And so statehood is closer now than it's ever been. Of course, we've got a couple of rogue Democratic senators that we still have to work with to get it across the finish line. But we're much closer than we've ever been. And so for me, statehood is absolutely a priority. And seeing that to fruition would be something, and one of the motivating reasons why I'm running. But Pablo, I also feel like we've never been a one-dimensional city. And there are other issues that we can be pursuing on behalf of DC residents in addition to statehood. So while we're still working on that issue, my platform presents some progressive policies that people have talked about, that they're interested in, that offer some tangible solutions, such as universal basic income, universal health care, some criminal justice reform, some things in education. I really feel strongly about building on the platform of statehood and beyond, feeling like once we do achieve statehood, which we will, what types of policies do we want to advocate for? Because that's what you want to do. You want to be prepared. You don't want to wait till you get something to then start advocating for it. Know what you want to bring to the table so that when you get there, you're ready to go.
So today is actually a really interesting day to have this conversation because the Senate is in session, but the House is not. And one of the interesting things about being the representative from Washington, D.C. is that, fly out day, as they say, the day when Congress leaves Washington and goes back to their districts, doesn't actually apply to the representative for Washington. So let's say hypothetically a year from now, like a parallel example, the Senate's in, the House is out, and you have the chance to go in because obviously as a member of Congress, you have full access to the building and go talk to these Democratic senators who are holding out on statehood specifically. What do you tell them?
I would tell them that it's a human rights issue. I would ask them to look at it not in a political lens, but from a transcending of politics lens, and say to yourselves, you look across history and states have been entered without constitutional amendments. People have been taxed. The whole Boston Tea Party was around lack of representation, right? So we've been here before. We're not asking for anything other than human rights and for us to be acknowledged and have the same voting rights, the same protections, the same representation that all of the other states in the union have. We pay our taxes. We have more population than Wyoming. We have more population than Vermont, and yet we pay more taxes than 33 other states in the union. And so it's just, for me, I would really endeavor to lead with the humanity and the humane aspect of what statehood is, and try my best to leave the political part of the discussion out of it. I actually got an opportunity. You speak about the Senate Democrats, but also Republican as well. This is a bipartisan issue. This is even not a Democratic issue. This is a bipartisan issue. And so I feel like there is room for some conversation on both sides around this. So much so I was fortunate enough to write a bipartisan op-ed with a DC Republican, Mike Benesha. We published it a couple of months ago about how the parties can come together to view this as a patriotic issue, and one that we can find some common ground on if we take the political piece out of it. And so I believe that there is room for conversation. I want to go back to one thing that you said as well, when you said the House being out and people going back to the district. I would do that same thing too. I feel like, it's I wouldn't want to take things for granted simply because I'm here in DC. I would endeavor to be as present as possible to the people that I would be representing. If they are gracious enough to put me in office, the one of the very least things I can do is show myself in the district, make myself accessible, make myself available. And so just because my district would happen to be the district, I would want to go out there so that people can see my face and they can know, they can let me know how I'm doing. They can hold me accountable if I'm not doing things the way that they, want me to do them. So I would be also very present in the district, because my goal is to represent the voices of the constituents, not just what I think is best.
So one of the things that the District of Columbia has certainly been in the forefront of over the last, say, 8-9 years is the decriminalization, first of cannabis and now of mushrooms. And this is something that I feel like is, as a fellow District of Columbia resident and long time, I feel like we are at the bellwether, like at the front end of a curve toward like more of a national push toward recognizing sort of like the mental health impacts and stuff like that, instead of just criminalizing everyone that we possibly can. So where do you fall on these on specifically on like the cannabis economy and the mushroom economy in the District of Columbia, and sort of like perhaps developing it as a case in point or a case study for the rest of the nation to follow?
Well, I think that we have a unique position to be able to do that in the District of Columbia on a number of issues, right? I think that we can set the stage for so many people to follow, which is another reason why statehood is so important, because we can be sort of this shining example of how these very popular positions can and should work on a larger scale. And I think those can be demonstrated here in the district. That being said, I am very much pro legalizing cannabis. I'm very much, because I think that in addition to the health benefits, in addition to the fact that these are natural plants and all that, I think it's an economic justice issue, and that's one of my policy proposals is presenting more economic justice opportunities and kind of leveling the playing field so that more people have an opportunity to benefit in our economy. And we've seen what the cannabis industry has done to our economy and the potential for it to grow even more. Specifically, even here in DC, the cannabis industry has exploded. And I think that the more people who have the opportunity to participate in that economic realization, I think the better it will be for a nation, for our country, and then we can model it for the nation.
So two more questions. The first being, in terms of scaling up policies, and this is more of like a macro question, less about the district and more about the Democratic Party during the midterm. What do Democrats need to do? What policies do you see Democrats? What are Democrats doing right, and what are Democrats doing wrong? I guess at like a party level, in order to maintain their majority in the House.
I think we're trying to find our way. I think we're in a very unique period, right? I think past elections we can't use as a precedence, because what we've experienced since 2020 is very different than anything we've experienced in history. And so I think for the most part, what Democrats are endeavoring to do is stick to the issues that help people and promote ourselves as the people who are going to look out for the working class and the middle class. And I think those are right things to do as well. But I also think that we need to be a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more aware of who we're dealing with. This is in my opinion, different Republican Party than it has been in the past. And so I think that we could be, as a national party, a bit more aggressive in terms of the steps that we are taking to protect voting rights, to insist that we are not going to give over to some of the extremism that we are seeing coming from the right, in my opinion. So we are really going to have to hold our ground. I appreciate these outreaches for bipartisanship, but I think that we also need to be a little quicker on the draw in recognizing that folks may not be interested in that, and we might have to be able, be willing to go about it ourselves in the name of democracy and in the name of taking care of people. So I think we just need to be more articulate about that, about our willingness to push things through on behalf of the people if we need to, and not so much think that we can conduct ourselves in business as usual, because we're not in the same climate that we used to be before. But let me say something else on a more local perspective, and this is something we're doing within our campaign. We launched a campaign within our campaign last week. Midterms matter. Because what we're finding is that people tend to drop off during the midterm election, right? If it's not presidential, if there's not, that marquee race on the ballot, people are not turning out. And we're finding that here in DC. So one of the things that will be key to a win for our campaign is getting those numbers up. So when we looked at the 2018 midterm primary here in DC, not looking at 2020 necessarily because that was an outlier because everybody was voting in 2020. But when I look back to 2018 midterm and I look at the turnout for DC, it was 18%. Out of the 493,000 likely voters for 2018 in DC, only 89,000 people voted. That to me is abysmal. And that to me says that we have a lot of work to do, even in our local districts, in getting people out to vote. So if my message is wonderful and we've got all the talking points down to that, that's all well and fine, but that's only one part of it. We need to find out what else it is that we need to do to get people to turn out. We can get people registered. People in DC in particular, we have high registration across the wards. But when it comes to turnout, we are not getting the people to actually come out the door and to vote. And so we are endeavoring to talk with people. What I'm hearing is, I'm just not seeing tangible solutions. I'm not seeing things happen in my life, my everyday life that relate to me. For instance, statehood, I'm very passionate about it. And the residents, they very much want it. But they'll also say to me, but Reverend Wendy, how's statehood going to put groceries on my table? How's statehood going to help me get my next job? And I recognize what they're saying. And you have to validate people's feelings. You have to hear their voices as well. And so we also have to be looking at, why are people not as inspired to come out during the midterms, both here in DC and nationally? We have to work together with the voters, something to come out to vote for. We can't just assume because we're running that people are automatically going to come. And so I'm endeavoring to be a candidate who is proposing tangible solutions and whatever it takes to inspire folks, not just to register to vote, but to actually believe that government can work for them, that their representative will do things on their behalf and actually come out and vote in the primary in 2022.
Okay. So last question. Let's say you were to walk outside right now and there's like a Secret Service black car waiting for you saying, Reverend Wendy, you got to come with us. The president and the vice president need to talk to you, or they want to talk to you. So it's like, they take you down to the White House. They escort you into the Oval Office. Yes. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden is sitting there. What do you tell them? What's your pitch? What do you need from them?
Well, the first thing I want to say is congratulations Kamala Harris, because she is a Howard University alumni, as am I. So we would have to do the obligatory HU, So, I mean, we would have to get, I'm just saying, we have to get that Howard connection out of the way first. But after all of those pleasantries, then, my first thing would be, how can I, as a citizen of the United States, help you? What can I do? Because we have to work together on a local level. And so with whatever influence I have here in the District of Columbia, how can I help you and this administration better communicate? Because I believe your hearts are in the right place. And I believe the country is hungry for what it is you want to offer. I want to talk about the tangible, practical ways to get your ideas accomplished so that people can feel like you are doing what you said you were going to do. I'll say, for instance, today, he gave a big speech. Joe Biden did, President Biden, on the Voting Rights Act, and it sounded really good, and he hit all the right notes, and you said all the right things. But everybody is saying, "But what's your plan? What's your plan, Mr. President?" And so that's what I would say. Good words and good speeches and rhetoric are good, but we need tangible. People are crying out for tangible solutions. That's why the stimulus payments were tangible things that people can say, yes, I appreciate that President Biden went in there and kept his word and got those checks to us. So those are things that people can hang their hat on. But it's way beyond time for us to just make promises and to make beautiful speeches about what we're going to do. We actually have to do them. We have to put tangible action plan steps in place if we want to gain people's trust.
Got it. Well, Reverend Wendy Hamilton, good luck with your campaign. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us on
you.
Meet La Prensa. Viewer, you can find Reverend Wendy's Twitter handle right here in the description to this video.
Right.
And thank you so much for joining us again, our very first political candidate.
Yes, can I give my website as well? You can find out more.
Absolutely. Definitely do. Definitely do.
All right, so I am at revwendyforcongress.com. revwendyforcongress.com. Please check us out. I really appreciate this opportunity. I love DC, and I'm hoping that the residents will give me a chance.
RevWendyForCongress.com.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.
All right.